finally we put water in the entrance. But for 3 days there was nowhere I could find water.
Sorry, this is a good idea. Let me grab my, I brought some myself.
It's so incredible. For me this is warm, right? So I'm thirsty.
Zijn we weer? Het succestenders. Ja, zeker.
Hello, hello. Good morning. Good morning. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be with you here in Sharm el Sheikh or online, and I'm looking forward to a terrific panel discussion. The framing of our event here this morning is how to mobilize private sector finance towards inclusive, climate-resilient food systems. Inclusive, climate-resilient food systems. And we've got 3 main objectives. We want to deepen our understanding of private sector finance's role in building those climate-resilient food systems. We want to, secondly, share experiences to close the gap between innovative, sustainable agriculture ideas and being investment ready. And thirdly, we really want to showcase some ways to strengthen public-private partnerships. And we're fortunate to have an absolutely outstanding panel with us today. Evan Gervitz, the principal scientist and global program lead at SIAT. Welcome, Evan. We've got Annemarie Groot, online team leader, climate resilience from Wageningen University and Research. We've got Laureen Unjuguna sitting next to me here, who is the general manager at Starlight Farmers Cooperative Society. We have my good friend Pariski Permana, who's SMV's country director, Indonesia. We have Barry Martin, member of the managing board at Rabobank. Welcome. And we have Peter Nell Bogard, Director of Agribusiness, Food and Water at FMO. So great panel, great panel. And we're delighted to be having concluding remarks from Ralph van der Beek, the Director, International Agribusiness Food Security at the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality. So just before I turn over to Evan, some key facts, ladies and gentlemen. Despite the urgency of the situation, despite the climate change urgency and high-level commitments from last year's COP in Glasgow, COP26, we know that climate finance for agri-SMEs is yet still to really emerge. Only approximately 4%, or US dollars 700 million, went to value chain actors in non-OECD countries. So we're falling well short there. That's a relatively tiny amount, isn't it? Relative to the scale of needs. There's clearly a massive financial gap. The missing middle, if indeed it is a middle, perhaps it's more than a middle, perhaps it's somewhere else, is still lacking around 65 billion across sub-Saharan Africa, $65 billion. Currently, most of the finance that is coming is not coming through banks, but it's coming from companies and informal networks. And we know we need more patient capital, more sophisticated blending financing structures, and I hope we're going to hear about some of those as we go through our discussion. We know we need a diversity of partners and different partnership mechanisms, particularly to enable that all-important de-risking. And then we need portfolio or aggregator models and approaches. that also include that important, very necessary technical assistance. So I'm looking forward to a great discussion, and with that, I think we're going to try and do a Slido if the technology is going to work for us. So we've got a few questions that we just wanted to see if everyone's aware of the state of the situation at the moment. I don't know if we can pull up those questions, and I think you can scan on your app if your technology is sophisticated enough, and then pull up the Slido questions. But the first one is, what is the main climate risk in agriculture in investments? What's the main climate risk? Hoping the answer is going to magically materialize in about 5 seconds now. Drought, unpredictability. Well, actually, ladies and gentlemen, the main risk is heat and drought. And then to the second question, how much will smallholder farmers' yields be reduced with a 2-degree temperature increase? How much is it going to be reduced, or how much are they going to be reduced by? If we can click on to the second question, please. Not quite coming, that second question. Oh, I'm told I'm the clicker. Not coming through. Well, I think, ladies and gentlemen, what I'll do is I'll just give you the questions and the answers, and then we will move on. So, how much will smallholder farmer yields be reduced with 2-degree temperature increases? That's 50%. That's a 50% likely reduction. And then thirdly, how much climate finance went to agri-SMEs in non-OECD countries? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, is 4%. So 4%. And then the fourth question, where does most of the finance for farmers come from? And as I said, actually, in my introductory remarks, it comes from those informal sources, so it doesn't come from the formal banking structures. With that, Evan, I'm delighted to welcome you up to the panel to really talk to us about the overall topic, about explaining the challenges and opportunities, and let's try and get some of those opportunities out if we can, Evan, around scaling finance toward climate-smart agriculture. Evan, over to you. Welcome.
Good morning, and Simon, thanks for teeing that up. Excellent. That was exactly where I wanted to start, was with the big financing gap that we see, that the private sector really needs to come in and private finance needs to fill for the agri-food systems that we're working in. I myself, I live in Nairobi, Kenya. I work for the CGIAR, an international consortium of agricultural research centers. For the past decade, I've been working on the ground with farmers and partners to bring climate-smart agriculture to them across Africa and across the world. And as I thought about the panel today, I think we can look at finance, as Simon was mentioning, in many different ways, the challenges that are there, as well as the level of intervention and change that needs to happen from addressing issues at the farmer level, mentioning the SME and the missing middle, and the role of cooperatives, and then up to the large private finance flows, banks, asset managers, and so many different challenges across there. But myself, as I was reflecting on coming from Kenya and the work that we do, I wanted to start at the farmer level and think about what they need and the challenges there, but also the solutions. And certainly to start with microfinance as one, some work that we're doing, I know many do, in one way that we can get finance to smallholder farmers. Certainly they need inputs, they need assets, productive assets for them to produce and to sustainably intensify and be more climate smart. But there's also challenges with bringing microfinance to them. For one that I see is that it really, they need to be commercially oriented in some ways. And so, I mean, there's a challenge right there that a lot of the farmers we work with are subsistence farmers, and how we can be engaging them in some kind of commercial enterprise so they can have an income source so that they could pay back the loans that they take. there's a need for strong value chains, and a lot of work to be done around that. Certainly a lot of work has been done, but those strong value chains, I think, is that's where I see microfinance being successful, and often it's the high value crops, it's the cocoa, it's the coffee. I joke, wait, that's what I like to consume, but this isn't supporting, the food security for the food systems that I see around me in Africa, in Kenya, where I live. We're doing some work now, myself and colleagues at the CGIR are working with partners at the firm Financial Access. They're based between the Netherlands and Kenya. And we wanted to address how we could bring microfinance to staple crops, sorghum in particular, being a drought-tolerant, resilient crop. And so we worked on their data-to-deal approach, which is to go assess the value chains, understand them from a data perspective, design a model, a microfinance model that could work, and work with a microfinance institution or commercial bank to commercialize that. Now, in the end, what we found was the off-taker that was needed was the malting industry for beer. So again, it comes back to what sort of what I would consume, but not what I see for food security in the country. So I think that's a challenge that we need to address. We're also working with them now on dairy. So I think there's real opportunities here in how we can bring climate risk informed credit scoring into this, how we can be banking farmers that don't have good credit history and using innovative ways where we're looking at credit scoring. I think this is one place that we can do some work on. Now moving up to the next level of the agribusiness ecosystem, the SMEs, the missing middle that Simon was mentioning. Certainly these SMEs, I see them as the engine of the rural economies of where we're working, and so critical to bring finance into them. But really there are so many challenges there, as Simon was alluding to. I mean, for one, I see the technical challenges of getting the services that they're providing to be climate smart themselves, to be promoting the things that build resilience in these systems. And so we as a research organization are working with the SMEs to bring them the technologies that are best, say, drought-tolerant seeds. But then also looking at bottlenecks they have and seeing how we can bundle together multiple services, maybe an agro-advisory service with inputs that's a better offering, a better business offering for them, and addressing the bottlenecks through this complementarity of bundling. But then certainly there's a large challenge to bringing investments into the SMEs. There's high risks, perceived or real risks, sometimes perceived, but often real risks that the companies there face. The SMEs, lack of good business plans, lack of financial information on these companies. Certainly technical assistance can help, and that's something that we can be building, working through entrepreneurial support organizations, running accelerator programs that we can help these kind of SMEs. I'm happy to announce that in a couple of weeks in Nairobi, we'll be launching a new accelerator program for SMEs to be more climate smart, to promote diversification and sustainable intensification across countries in East and Southern Africa. And this is in partnership with 2Scale, who maybe some of you know, that's associated with the Netherlands, Open Capital as another organization that we're working with in partnership here in Africa to address and to help accelerate these SMEs that are there. I also think there's an issue around just aggregation. These are small companies, and we need to be, and small farmers, we need to aggregate them. And I think there's a real role for cooperatives. And I look forward to my colleague, colleague from Kenya who's here, to Laureen, to talk about the role of cooperatives in here and how we can be bringing finance into that. So I think we can have some great discussions around that. And then as we go up to the higher level of investors, asset managers, banks, there's all kinds of issues too that need to be addressed there for how that money can come down into the level of the SMEs, the cooperatives, and onto the ground to the farmers that we have there. I think there's no shortage in this, I mean, at least in a sense, of the supply of capital. There's capital that wants to come into this sector and wants to be doing good things in the world, but the risk and return has to get right for them. They do want to address environmental, social, governance. They want to address ESG. But still the challenge of how do you make that business model work? How do you make how do you find the bankable investments and the bankable projects on the ground? Certainly blended finance is something that's an opportunity, and I think something that we can look at and discuss on the panel. There are innovative financing mechanisms that have been developed, like the Dutch Fund for Climate Development and a new fund, the Climate Smart Food Systems Fund that the CGIAR and their asset manager responsibility recently launched. But there's also a big challenge with the ticket size that they look at. I mean, at least 3 million, could be much more, often much more, 100 plus million. For some, that's the size that they want to be investing in. And so how do we address this mismatch there? And just to wrap up, just to say that I think we have this challenge of how do we get that money, how do we find and aggregate the bankable investments that can come there, bring investment into the missing middle, the role of cooperatives, and then really getting that money down to the level of smallholder farmers. And we need to strengthen those farmers in the value chains, organize them, and cooperatives is one way that can do that. Work on accelerating of the SMEs there, bringing technical assistance in, and then working through innovative structuring of financial models that can address this. And so I look forward to the discussion today and the panel that's here.
Thank you, Evan, very, very much, and great to hear, not only some of the challenges, but really those opportunities and some exciting initiatives to be coming soon. Before we turn to you, Laureen, we're hoping to be able to show a short video of the craft program in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, supported by the Dutch government and Rabobank. So if you could please roll the video.
We are living in a situation whereby we are already faced by extreme climate shocks. We have extreme droughts, flash floods, unpredictable weather patterns and climatic patterns, which affect planning in terms of production. So farmers are unable to plan accordingly, and therefore they miss season, or sometimes they do not plan.
When craft came in, they had to support us, strengthen our extension services. Of course, it was about co-funding. We sat on table, we agreed to co-finance 50-50%. When you go down rurally, you see that the people who first meet the challenges, they are women, then youth. So we promoted them by giving them trainings of different skills, including even financial literacy, such that they are capacitated.
I'm a widow, but during the cooperative, it made me who I am now. I managed to pay my school fees of my grandson. Now he's in senior 5 because of what I'm doing with craft.
Fantastic, thank you. So, Laureen, I couldn't be more delighted to have you with us, because there's no one better placed than you to speak to how within the craft program's co-investment fund, millions is being leveraged. So, Laureen, over to you to tell us about that.
Thank you. My name is Laureen. I'm a General Manager of Starlight Farmers Cooperative Society, which is based in Nakuru County in Kenya. We are working with 2,164 farmers in the agriculture value chain, specifically in the potato value chain. And we are implementing a climate resilient agribusiness for tomorrow project in partnership with SNV, Rabobank, and overall the project is financed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Netherlands. And the main focus of this project is to scale up adoption of climate change techniques and even practices along using the small agripreneurs and also using cooperatives and farmers. So at Starlight, we have been focusing specifically in the potato value chain, empowering the farmers in the potato value chain, and ensuring that they adapt to climate-smart agriculture technologies. And our business case is focused on 3 point areas. Okay. Allow me to just share a brief on this map, which just shows overally in Kenya the way climate change has impacted the potato value chain. And basically we can see how the red areas are more than basically the green or the blue area. And that shows how we are expecting overall decrease in production in the potato value chain. Basically the main counties, being 16 of them, the decrease is very high, over 60, over 32, and 42% decrease expected over the years due to the increase of heat and also decrease of the rainfall. So at Starlight, we are implementing the Climate Smart project under CRAFT, focusing on 3 areas in our business case. The first one being Climate Smart agriculture initiatives. And in this initiative, we are working with the small-scale farmers. We are using, number 1, the farmer field school model to empower the farmers with skills on climate smart agriculture, setting demonstration farms, showcasing different techniques, showcasing, just teaching them how to adapt to different techniques on climate smart agriculture. We are also simplifying weather information for them, getting weather information from the weather hubs, simplifying it in a very understandable way, and giving them course of action to take based on the weather information. We do that in every 2 weeks. We are also doing soil testing for them, providing the soil testing services, and also going to the extent of explaining to them how to adapt to the soil testing results. We are also providing mechanization services because we understand mechanization is very key in addressing of issues of climate change. Secondly, we are in the potato seed production value chain, and we are doing this to ensure that farmers have access to affordable and good quality seeds at the community level. And to ensure that we meet the demand, we are using a scheme we call the growers. We have 100 farmers we have empowered with skills in seed production, and they do the production themselves, and we are able to market to other farmers. And thirdly, we have been able to empower the cooperative at the technical capacity, because many cooperatives and agri-SMEs are not succeeding because of lack of capacity. And through the CRAFT project, we have been able to ensure we have technical staff and also empowerment of the leaders to ensure that they have the capability to dispense the skills and to dispense all that is needed and overall management of the cooperative. Basically, before the project, we were going through a number of challenges when it comes to financing. And number 1 was limited financial facilities, because when a cooperative doesn't have the capacity, of course, accessing financing becomes a challenge. Secondly, we were investing just in activities based on the farmer needs, and this led to investing in low economic value activities. And thirdly, also we had a limited capacity to attract climate financing, because overall when you don't have you are not bankable, then it becomes very difficult to attract financing. And through the project, we were able to implement a number of initiatives. We started implementation last year in March, and the project is still ongoing. And so far, we have been able to invest in mechanization, mechanizing the value chain of potatoes in the line of climate smart, to ensure that the farmers have access to machinery on time, to ensure the work is less labor intense and attractive specifically to women and the youth in the community. Secondly, we have been able to build the capacity base of the cooperative, because now investing in the capacity of the staff and overall leadership, investing in mechanization has enabled in building the capacity base overall of the cooperative society. And this has made the cooperative bankable. Before the CRAFT project, we used to knock the doors of the banks and no one was willing to give us a loan. But today, the banks are calling us. They are telling us, can you come, we give you a loan. We are having even investors now knocking our doors and asking, can you work with us? And that was not happening before we started the implementation of the CRAFT project. Fourthly, we have been able, as I've mentioned earlier, to build the capacity base. We recruited staff who have the capacity, especially we have an agronomist. We have also empowered trainers, we call them TOTs, and also lead farmers in the community. And why have we done this? We have done this for sustainability because we cannot only depend on the paid staff. Because when you depend on the technical paid staff, then it becomes very unaffordable and very unsustainable. But when you build the leaders in the community and the youth in the community to dispense these services, then we make the services more affordable, and this enhances the ownership and the sustainability of the project.
Fantastic.
We have also de-risked we have come up with de-risking structures, and we never used to insure our assets, we never used to insure the crops, but because of the craft project, we are now doing insurance. We are working based on a business plan. We are working following our cash flows from the budget and on monthly basis, quarterly basis, and this has enabled us to build our risk is now more, we can say we are now more de-risked than never before.
Wonderful, Laura. I think we'd love to sit here all day and hear about all the successes, but it's terrific to have your perspective, and it's that the banks are starting to come to you. That's the takeaway message that I heard. How wonderful, Lauren. If I can ask you to sit down, and then we'll have a conversation in a little bit. And congratulations indeed for your success. I'm delighted now to welcome online Anne-Marie Groot, Team Leader Climate Resilience at Wageningen. Anne-Marie, I hope you're with us, and again, magically, there you are, appearing behind me on the screen. Warm welcome. And we're so pleased to have you with us, Anne-Marie, to really hear about, how we can promote climate action consistent with the science, and of course, the perspective from Wageningen here. So over to you, Anne-Marie.
Okay. Good morning to all of you. Can you hear me well?
Loud and clear.
Yes, thank you. I'm working with Wageningen University and Research, and we are a partner in the craft project. And thank you very much for providing me the opportunity to share an interesting experience from the craft project, showing the usefulness of climate science for local banks to identify the likely impact of climate change on their portfolio and to help them to take climate smart decisions to mitigate climate risk. In the craft project, we developed several what we call climate services, or pieces of climate information that help agribusiness companies, cooperatives, but also farmers to make climate smart decisions. I show you a few examples of what we are producing. Can you start my presentation? Next slide, please. Okay, this first example shows drought maps. Those maps show the probability of drought during 2 growing seasons of potatoes in Tanzania. The second example shows a map that presents the likely impact of climate change on potato production in Tanzania in 2050 under the worst climate change scenario. In craft, we also provide information on the feasibility of relevant adaptation measures, and that is shown in the third map. Next slide, please. What we also do is we produce what we call crop suitability maps. And the use of these maps is very interesting, not only for agribusiness cooperatives and farmers, but also for local banks, and I will come back to that later. Here you see 2 maps. One on the left, showing the suitable areas for potato production in Tanzania in the current situation. On the right, you see the suitability for potato cultivation in future
around 250 under climate change conditions. The green areas showed highly suitable areas for potato growing. The orange parts are areas with a low suitability. But these suitability maps do not only take climate change into account, but also economic conditions, soil conditions, land use, and socioeconomic conditions. So in this particular example, what does these maps tell us? Well, they show that the suitability in major potato growing areas will be significantly reduced in future. And this is mainly due to an increase in temperature. These maps are the basis for a discussion about what can be done to reduce this negative impact of climate change. Or in other words, what could be interesting adaptation measures to mitigate climate risk. Can you go to the next slide, please? For that discussion, we produce adaptation potential maps. As an example, for potatoes in Tanzania, here we show you two maps showing the potential of two relevant adaptation measures in terms of feasibility. Warehouses to store potatoes under warmer conditions, and irrigation to overcome periods of drought. The yellow-colored areas are those areas where warehouses and irrigation have good potential to lower negative impact of climate change on potato production. And the dark spots are the areas where the potential of these two measures is relatively low. Now I come back what I mentioned earlier, that the use of these maps are of high interest to local banks. Can you show the next slide? Okay, maybe click again. Yeah, okay. Here you see the same suitability map as I showed before, but now we combine it with financial data provided by a local bank. And what the map shows is the amount a local bank invests in potato in a specific area. Next slide, please. Yeah, click again. So now for the future situation, you see these maps tells the bank that their portfolio is at risk in the southwestern part of Tanzania and in the western part of Tanzania. And that's a good start to discuss what kind of adaptation measures are interesting to invest in to mitigate this climate risk for the bank. Can you go to the next slide? So then we bring in again these adaptation potential maps. Can you click? Click again. Combining the suitability maps with the financial data provided by the local bank and these adaptation potential maps, for this particular example, it shows that for the bank, the Southwest, it's not so interesting to invest in warehouses or irrigation in the southwestern part of Tanzania. But it is interesting to invest in warehouses and irrigation in the western part of Tanzania to reduce the bank's risk due to climate change. Next slide, please. So, by way of conclusion, from our first experience in the CRAFT project, we recommend that to trigger local banks to invest in agribusiness, discuss with banks the potential risk on the portfolio due to climate change, for which we can use the crop suitability maps combined with financial data provided by the local banks, and make also use of adaptation potential maps to help the bank to identify adaptation measures these banks could invest in to mitigate climate-related risk. And in the very end, and we have seen it in the example Lorraine was talking about. The use of climate science can trigger banks to invest in bankable and climate-smart business cases like that of Starlight, which enables Starlight to encourage farmers to adopt adaptation measures as a way to increase their resilience to climate change. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. So for me, ladies and gentlemen, what an amazing example of the importance of a partnership where you have a Wageningen, a Starlight, Rabobank, Dutch government financing, SMV, all working together in really complementary ways. You really brought it home so clearly there, Anna-Marie. Thank you very, very much. So now we're just going to make a little bit of a pivot to the innovative Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, and I'm hoping a video is going to pop up on the screen behind me, because we want to be able to show here how the DFCD is enabling that private sector investment in projects aimed at climate adaptation and mitigation. If we could roll the video, please.
Today, it is already affecting people and nature across the globe, with developing countries being most impacted. There is an urgent need for investment to enable vulnerable communities and ecosystems to adapt to climate change. Yet funding is in short supply. The government of the Netherlands has committed to addressing this need by making 160 million euros available through the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, known as the DFCD. Managed by a pioneering consortium of FMO, Climate Fund Managers, SNV and WWF, the DFCD will work with the private sector to catalyze over 500 million euros in additional funding for bankable projects across the world. These projects will boost the health of fresh water, forest, agricultural and ocean ecosystems, and improve water management. Critically, the DFCD will help vulnerable communities to adapt, drive sustainable development, and strengthen global efforts to tackle climate change. The fund is ready to build new partnerships. So join us in our mission to create a more resilient future.
Terrific, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, what we're really, in case you can't tell, what we're trying to bring home here is that message of partnership and the different actors in a partnership being clear on their roles, not trying to replicate one another, but when we're all clear on our respective roles, that's how we start to identify those pathways to all important scale. I promise you we're about to have a panel conversation, but just before then I'm going to invite SMV's country director from Indonesia, Rizky Permana, to come up, and just in 5 minutes or so, Rizky, if you can talk to us, concretize for us the DFCD. Thank you, Rizky.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rizky Permana. I'm a country director of SNV in Indonesia. I'm also part of DFCD project as a project advisor. So, yeah, I'm not going to explain more the background about the DFCD, but I mean, like, just want to emphasize that what makes the DFCD different from the other facility. I mean, like, first is about that we are focusing more on the climate adaptations. I mean, like 65% of our intentions, and then we are also using the landscape approach in most of our cases. And this is last one is we are doing the 2 stages blended investment process. We call it like an origination phase and also the graduate investment. So you can see from the graphs, actually, this is really how the DFCD can fill in the gap between the traditional scheme done by mostly by the NGOs, for example, and also the private ones. Yeah. So as the SNV works as in the origination phase, what is the origination phase itself? So actually, we are working to identify the bankable projects or the private sectors as a partner. And then together with them, we work on the proposals, and then so to be submitted in the investment committee. Once it is approved, that's where the DFCD origination phase provided like a grant and also the technical assistance funding to these private companies. Yeah. So this is overall, I mean, like we are currently working with 30 cases all over the globe from Asia, Africa, and also Latin America. And most of them are still ongoing. But actually, if you're talking about the pipeline, we're talking about more than like a 50 pipelines, yeah, currently in our hand. Yeah, I'm going to show you like two cases from Asia. Yeah, I think this is more relevant for us to discuss about why this origination phase is needed and how it's doing by SNV and our partner. So the first one is from Vietnam. It's we are working with a company called Comimex. Yeah, it's one of the leading mangrove shrimp export companies. Yeah, the idea of them having joining at DFCD is also they are intended to expand their sustainable operations in the areas in the Cà Mau area in the Vietnam. Currently, they're working with in one site like around 7,000 hectares. And they intended to expand to around like 16,000 hectares in the coming future, which is they intend to do it in a sustainable way. And they also want to have like a improvement in terms of their processing capacity in Cà Mau and also the hatchery. So that's some of the idea of why they want to expand their business in the coming future. So this origination facility actually ensure that their existing sites and also their future sites can be sustainable and also can be scaled up. Yeah. So the idea of this origination facility, the activities in the origination facility is we're helping them in terms of like how in the existing site they can meet the sustainability standard, for example. But then we're also preparing them for the future or the expansions of their areas. So for example, so the funding that they are receiving currently is 290,000 euros that is used for certifications, the training to their staff and also to the farmers, and also to pay the payment for environmental services scheme, and the technical assistance that we are provided, I mean like SNV is providing, is also for some of the assessment, like the environmental and social assessment, for example, or gender and social inclusion assessment. And they are also currently interested to explore more on the blue carbon potential for this site. So the assessment that we are doing using that origination funding is also for that kind of activities. Yeah. This is the second case from Bangladesh, Ispani. As you know, that the Ganges Delta in Bangladesh is also prone with the climate. I mean, like the northern part and the southern part. For example, in the southern part in Khulna, they also like prone with the salination issue. In the northern part is prone with the drought issue. So this company is a leading supplier for agri inputs and seeds, in particular the climate resilient seeds and also the biopesticide. So they intend to expand, improve the resilience of their contract farmers and also the smallholders under the DFCD program. So with this origination phase, they have like a two-stage or two things that they are, two aspects that are working. The first one is more the awareness building, and then the second one is the system change. So when you're talking about the awareness buildings, they are intent to really working with the farmers, conducting the training, improve the awareness, how they can update the better seed variety or pest management systems implemented in their areas. So that's the awareness building. Well, the system change is also, that's what the support that we are providing to the company. I mean, like supply chain planning, consumer market development, for example, and also, of course, the assessment for the environmental and social, and also the JC and all that kind of stuff. So for this case, the FCD provided 350,000 euros for the company. So this is the two examples of the origination phase that we are doing. But of course, after several years, there are some lessons learned that we are having. Yeah. So for sure, first, the origination phase is required, yeah, to get the investable proposals. But it's not a quick process. I can explain later in the discussion. And then identify the climate risk is also important for the companies when developing the business case. And of course, involvement of local actors. That's also another crucial aspect that need to be done when you want to increase the ownerships of the project itself. And of course, the early stage engagement from FMO and CFM is very crucial here. And yeah, this is another hot issue. I think its market needs a smaller ticket size investment, in particular in the least development countries.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to stop
Thank
it
you,
there.
Risky.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those lessons learned as well. So, thank you. Now I'm hoping we can start to have a conversation. If I could invite our panelists back onto the panel, please. And if I may, I'd like to start with you, Peter Nell and Berry. You know, there are clearly a number of financing instruments available, right? You know, be it guarantees, be it different ways to de-risk, be it blended finance. Why are we still struggling to scale that investment in sustainable smallholder farming? Peter Nell, or whichever one of you would like to go first.
I think it's, first of all, to reach the smallholders is a big challenge. How do you reach them out of the Netherlands, for instance, where you're sitting in The Hague with 600 people? How do you reach the rural areas and all these hundreds of millions of smallholder farms? There are different ways, via local banks, via now also organizations like yourself. So the first challenge is reaching the smallholders and finding the projects that are not only producing food for themselves, which is needed of course, but also who want to be more commercial and grow and become more scalable, because that is in the end what we're looking for. So that is a challenge to find them, and DFCD gives us a very unique possibility to do that, because before we were trying to do it ourselves, which was not a good idea or difficult, challenging, but now with the help of WWF and yourselves, we have a much better chance of finding the right projects smaller and scale them up over time. But it does take time, because you cannot expect a small cooperative, even if it is successful, to grow 10 times in 1 year. It takes a couple of years. So time is also a challenge, and getting to a certain size to convince commercial investors to invest.
Thank you, Peter Nell. And Berry, what would you add? And particularly on this, you know, we all know we don't have a lot of time for some of these things now. So what are the clever ideas around how we can accelerate on that journey, Berry?
Well, look, for us, Rabobank, Southeast Asia is not new, right? So we have been there for more than 50 years, first through the foundation. And always our philosophy is you need to, it's very tough to get that last mile to the smallholder farmer. So you need to create governance, so structures like cooperatives and all those things. We started doing that, but then we had a big flaw, is that we actually didn't have local currency financing. So we always giving the dollar financing and all those things. And then the idea of Rabobank was, okay, let's invest in local partner banks. So we started to do those local partner banks investments. In Tanzania, we were investor in NMB Bank. And the ones that are from Tanzania know the success story of NMB Bank, now the largest bank in Tanzania. And then in a partnership also with FMO and Northern, we pulled together $1 billion, and we really started to invest heavily in local banks to develop local currency. And then what happened was very interesting, that we have developed the local currency, we had developed the network for partner banks, because you have to imagine they have a lot of branches through the whole region. And then we started to approach a lot of the DFIs and all those, and then think, let's try to get together. And then it gets very complicated, because every DFI has its own rule, wants to have its own measurements, wants its own impact thing, everything. So at the end, you got one DFI and they would like ask 40 things to be checked off before you could give a loan. So it started impossible. So why blended finance is not working? Because the local banks, they do want to take the risk, but they need to take away, as we saw here, I call it the value of transition. You put it here, value of opportunity, right? So the value is that's not financeable by a commercial bank. But what we really need to do as donors is to make it simple, because a bank, a partner bank, doesn't have the capacity to not make all those 40 different things. And if the Germans come with one way, the Dutch come with one thing, the Swiss come with something else, at the end the bank needs to comply with something like 150 different rules and regulations, and therefore they're not going to do it. And then what happens, we still debate. So my plea, and as we are here with the Belgian, Luxembourg, and the Benelux, is can we have one simple rule, one simple set, 5 things to take off that's very easy, so that the local partner banks, they can easily deploy those money, because they do have the local currency. It's very important. We've done the most difficult. We have developed savings and local currency capacity, but we made it too complicated. So let's decomplicate it, and then I think it's going to fire.
Music, very to certainly my ears, and I'm sure many people's ears in the room. Let's just simplify it. Sometimes we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. Okay, thank you. Perhaps turning to you, Laureen, and to Risky. I mean, we had Wednesday here was Finance Day at COP27. A lot of conversation around the importance of financing and, of course, the importance of different types of financing. And I think within the context of both the CRAFT program and DFCD, we often hear about the need for smaller ticket sizes. Why is that so important, Laureen?
Thank you. For me, that's important because we have to look at the capacity of the agri-SMEs and the cooperatives. But when the structures are so huge and so complicated, then it becomes very difficult for the agri-SMEs and the cooperatives to bridge the gap and implement the initiatives that we need to implement and also attract financing. So it is very key to focus on the level of the agri-SMEs and the cooperatives on the ground, and to look at what needs to be done to ensure that they are able to achieve what needs to be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. And Risky, what would you add from the perspective of the DFCD in Indonesia? And perhaps not even Risky for Indonesia itself, but for some of those other countries, perhaps more fragile environments. What can we do, and why should we be focusing more on pulling down those ticket sizes?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Simon. I think, I'm not only talking about Indonesia. I think it's also more on the least developed country in particular, because we know that when we are talking also about the impact of the climate change, we are not only talking about the big scale here. We are also talking about the small player and the medium players in that regard, because even that small and the medium player, they also have impact to the shock and to the stress because of the climate change. Now, the thing is that the capacity of the small and then the medium is also different when talking with the big scale player. So that's why, I mean, like in terms of their needs and also how they can respond to the market, or how big the market that they need, for example. We sometimes only talk about the small thing here. I mean, like even below 5 million. And even sometimes in the cooperative level, I discussed with Lauren, it's below 1 million. So I think we need to address that kind of needs, because they're also the players when we are talking also about the impact of this climate change. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Risky. And then Evan and Anne-Marie, I'd like to turn to you both. I have a sense at this year's COP that there seems to be a bit of momentum building around a recognition of the opportunities, the investment opportunities in adaptation. And what was terrific, Anne-Marie, was you were really showing us the power of evidence and the power of science in some ways de-risking some of that investment. So how, Evan, I'll start with you. How How can we use research to demonstrate the impact of climate adaptation investments? How can we do that?
Well, I think research is critical here, and one of the things I mentioned, I think, has come up is that, I mean, these investments are risky, and sometimes they're perceived risks, and sometimes they're real risks. So I think one thing is to untangle those, is what really are the risks that the projects, the SMEs face on the ground. And I think Anna-Marie did a great job of showing some of these maps that you saw some green and you saw some red up there, and there's clearly different places where there's different kinds of risks that are there. Also, I mean, one of the goals or the key goal here that we're talking about is how we can finance resilient agriculture, climate smart agriculture for smallholder farmers. But also that agriculture itself is building resilience, is helping to reduce the risk for farmers out there, and brings a good business proposition there. So I think how we can get different kinds of climate smart agriculture out there, like irrigation, that can be shown to reduce risk and then improve the creditworthiness of these farmers on the ground. How we can be bringing in seeds that are shorter maturing and that help to ensure that crops can be harvested even when there's less rain during these times. And then bringing in services. I think especially digital services is a big opportunity for helping to de-risk the agricultural system by bringing in seasonal weather forecasts that can say, is it going to be a wetter or a drier season, to bring in shorter term advisories that can be delivered to farmers on their farm to help them manage throughout the season, so that they can then be able to be part of value chains, that they can be able to have a consistent production, and in aggregate then become more bankable as an investment at the right size. Oh, I think still the ticket size is a challenge, how we address that one.
Yeah, ticket sizes again. And Anne-Marie, I'll come to you, and then I think I'll ask the same question probably to Berry and Peter Nell. You know, around climate information. I mean, there's such an abundance of information everywhere, right? So there's kind of the question of when you have enough information, yeah, and then how can climate information and climate models really help inform financial institutions? Anne-Marie, starting with you.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Well, I do agree there is a lot of climate data available and lots of climate information available. But what we try to do in craft is to make it actionable. And to get it actionable, you need to relate it to and integrate it with other sectors, like the impact of climate change on crop production, or what does it mean for a bank's portfolio, climate change. Then this information supports action. And I think that's also a lesson for us, climate scientists, to think about how to make climate information actionable. Well, that is something we try to do in craft. Coming back to the point of measuring resilience, that's also something we are struggling with in craft. But what is important to realize that resilience through adaptation is something that takes place on the long term. Climate change is something that happens in future. We are not talking here about climate variability. We talk about climate change. So it takes time to be able to develop evidence and show that we have increased farmers' resilience. So sometimes we are just too impatient. We need to allow research, to allow stakeholders in the field to assess the change in resilience over an X number of years, and maybe decades even.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And probably on that one, then the challenge is sometimes the time cycles, be it financial or in the implementing side, in the project models, are too short, or they don't align around your longer term resilience framework, but your measurements there, yes? So the time cycles that we're all operating within tend to at times not be so well aligned. Peter Nell, do you, at FMO, do you have enough climate information? Are you getting the right kinds of information? Do you want more information?
Thank you for that question, because that touches upon something that I think is very important. The role of the bank, of course, is as an intermediary of bringing excess money to where it's needed, is getting bigger. It's not only about finance, it's also bringing knowledge and information, data, research, and so on. And that is exactly what we try to do. It also de-risks our clients, but also helps our clients, and with that, the planet. So there's never enough information, because in the end, we're just bankers, and we want to do the right thing, but we need to be informed about what the right thing is, and that differs in countries, that differs per continent, and so on. So research and information is extremely important. So we work a lot with Wageningen also. We have partnership with Wageningen. We're having the good fortune that we're in the Netherlands. We have the best university in agriculture in the world, I'm proud to say, and also one of the best agricultural banks. So in that respect, a lot of knowledge is there that we should bring also to the countries that need it, and that is our role. And I see also commercial banks slowly but surely going that direction as well.
Great, thank you. And one or two not bad implementing partners as well, if I may. And so Peter, now, just to stay with you for one more, if you don't mind. Why is origination and sourcing a project so important, and what more can be done on that front from organizations, you know, such as SMB or IDH or others in that origination?
Well, because organizations like SNV and WWF have local presence, you know what projects are the ones to pick in terms of content, but also who are the right people to support. Because that is, of course, a big challenge always, that you don't want to provide funds to those who abuse it. That's the reality of life. So you need to make sure you pick the right projects and the right parties that you want to work with and partner with, and who are willing to look at their business for the long term and not only for the profit in the short term. So that is a challenge, and for that we really need people on the ground and local presence and people who know the farmers, and especially when we talk about smallholder farms and rural areas.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the local and the global, right, has to start with, you know, contextual knowledge, local relationships, and real ground truth awareness of the opportunities. But Barry, coming to you, I mean, we're hugely proud, as you can tell, of the craft program and the impacts being generated and the 50 plus small and medium enterprises that we're working with, and we're all looking for 10x or 100x, you know, in terms of scaling. So what more can we do? And maybe a question to all of you on the panel, what more can be done to really motivate and influence other investors to join with us on that journey of scaling food systems transformation? You mentioned the local banks, which Rabobank is engaging with. That's terrific to hear. What more can we do?
Look, I don't think that our story is properly told. Look, as I said, we already involved many years. Actually, the business model of investing in food and agri in Eastern Africa has actually been very successful for us. The thing is that you need to have a plan. And for us, it always has been, if you go out there and you're going to finance projects, you need to look at the whole value chain. Because it's always, you lose money actually at the weakest link. And every time the weakest link is somewhere else. It could be at the smallholder farmer side, could be at the SME aggregator, it could be at the trader side. So if you look at the history of Rabobank involved in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, is that every time we came in either with the foundation, with partnerships, with our rural fund, or with the partner bank, or with FMO, or is that we always looked at the whole value chain. And I think this story, the success stories that we have been seeing, we have not been actually getting out there and showing them enough. A lot of people come to me, oh, you do very risky business. I don't see that like that. I don't see it as a risky business. It is risky if you get in there without really thinking what you're doing. So that was one of the parts that we really look at the Farm to Market Alliance, What was that? It really says it's farm to market alliance, where we first find somebody to buy the product, and then we walk down the whole value chain to get to the farmer that can supply that need of a buyer at the end of the value chain. So we have many examples right now in the beer industry and other crops. So that's really the part that we really have to understand. Yes, it is risky, but it's the weakest link that is the most risky part. And I have to confess that we as Rabobank, we will continue telling our story. We tell our story a lot in these places that we are here right now. In the whole world, we go out there and say, look, this is investable. But you need to be in the right networks and you need to have the time to understand it. So that's the way I look at it. And I just wanted to add one thing about risk, climate risk. What we are doing at Rabobank right now, look, we have included now in our risk model, so we have if you look at the risk model of a bank, you need, in the traditional risk model was you looked financials and you look collateral. We are adding a third vector, which is actually climatological risk. And we are more and more learning about that. And we are starting to provide technical assistance to our partner banks so that they also can include in their risk models the climatology. So the data which is being provided here is actually this input to those climate risks, because banks are going from a two-dimensional to a three-dimensional risk model, and that really changed completely the way you have to organize it. So, and that's why it's so good to work with Arise, which is our joint venture, and the partner banks, because we really need to change that, because once you will reward, once you put the risk, that climate risk in your model, you also reward the right climatological behavior, and that's what we need to do that. Today, the risk models of traditional risk models don't penalize wrong climatological, it doesn't benefit positive climatological adaptation, because at the end for a bank, it's all about your risk models and how it comes into how much capital you have to deploy for the financing.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Barry. So different types of risk models, partners, the right partners, clear on roles, and then that storytelling bit, storytelling. Evan, back to you. What's the 10x? What's the pathway to 10x or 100x?
Yeah,
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's a big one. But I mean, I think for one, it is, I mean, just picking up on what you were just saying there, I think how we can get this kind of climate information and better understand the risks that are there. From the research perspective, working on improved credit scoring models for the investments that are made, incorporating the climate risk into the risk models that you have with the banks is one. But in terms of getting to the 10x, I think the big thing there is a lot around aggregation. It seems to me that you know, working at the smallholder level is really a challenge, and we need to be aggregating up. I think cooperatives are one big way that we can be doing that, and then bringing these kind of models and then be able to assess the risk at that level there. I think digital, as I was saying before, brings a big opportunity. That is another way to aggregate together in a more distributed way. You know, mobile phone penetration is increasing immensely in sub-Saharan Africa and across the developing world. Farmers are so well connected, and through mobile money and other types of means of aggregation, I think that we can bring them together and then be collecting information from them in the proper way that they know it's being collected. But then we use that, and as we know, information is, you know, power in many ways, but allows us then to give the power to 10x up through those kind of approaches, and then linking all of that to the financial sector, that it really has to be done together in how these are designed, both from the bottom up, but I think also it needs to be from the top down. So as you were saying, I think sort of starting with the where you can aggregate, and then working on down to the farmer, that you can build the system where they provide in that value chain and the finance can come in at the 10x.
Yeah, hey, great, Evan. Thank you. And of course, I think we all share this passion, and we know this, and it's important to say it. We must ensure that those pathways to scale are inclusive, right? Inclusive of women and men, and inclusive of LDCs for sure, and those more fragile contexts as well. Because if we focus on scaling in those already advancing geographies, we're going to increase the disparities, you know, with those who are being left further behind. Laureen, Risky or with Starlight, what do you need to go 10 times bigger?
Thank you for that question. Number one is still on enhancing and sustaining the capacity because the big gap comes when the agri SMEs and the cooperatives are not well empowered. Sometimes investors put money without considering the capability of the SMEs and the cooperatives. So for me is a continuation in enhancing the management capacity and the technical capacity. Secondly is structuring projects considering the felt needs of the people on the ground. And I like the craft project because we did the business case, the business plan and the business concept ourselves. And that focused on the felt needs of the people, and that enhances implementation of a project that people own and people ensure the success and the sustainability. Thirdly, also more financial support in enhancing the initiatives we have been implementing, because one of the things with climate change initiatives is that they take long. Adaptation and the real results take time. So there is need for prolonged and follow-up with the farmers who have been trained and the initiatives implemented to ensure that they are sustainable and adaptation is taking place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I think, Risky, we would endorse that at SNV, the point around the need for technical assistance and that capacity building side. It's often underinvested in, it takes time, and you need to resource it appropriately. Risky, what would you add?
Yes, I think, I just want to emphasize on this origination scheme itself. I found that it is really needed and important because we are here talking about the proven business. Yeah, so we're talking about the proven business itself, then there's some step need to be done. And that's where, I found that the FCD origination phase is because it's also giving kind of a de-risking strategy because it's been done by multi-partners. We are talking about a lot of, SNV, FMO, CFM, and WWF with a different expertise. I think that's also one of the key. And then the second one is also how we can improve the proven business itself. That's the second one. And the third one that I just want to echo what Peter was saying is also about the local presence. Because I think that's really, really important when we are talking also about the successful of a business cases globally. So I think, that's the 3 points that I would like to raise. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Risky, very much. So we've got time for one or perhaps two questions from the audience. I think we may have a roving microphone. Does anyone have a question for our panelists? Please, sir, here in the middle. You may have to be brave and walk up to the front, and I'll hand my microphone over to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Kwame from Ghana, and I work for a financial institution, the Agricultural Development Bank. I am interested in this topic because we deal a lot with smallholder farmers. However, what our experience has been, especially with development finance partners, is their definition of small, right? Their definition of small, right? So they say they have small funding for smallholder farmers, but the thresholds are way beyond what the smallholder farmers typically of the local setting can take up, right? And therefore it becomes very much challenging for us who are involved with them to also access them for these farmers. The second one is about pricing, right? Climate financing, adaptation financing, I believe ought to also be able to consider the pricing of those funding for the smallholder farmers, the true local, should I say, African smallholder farmer. Because given the sizes by which they operate, they are unable to make the kind of margins to cater for the financing, the cost of financing that is available from the partners who are championing adaptation finance, right? So that is one thing that should also be looked at in terms of matching the pricing of that and the purpose of the financing. And finally, it looks to me as if a lot of times, even the proponents of adaptation finance and sustainability either do not have a clear understanding of how exactly profitable these smallholder farmers are relative to the funding available, and how to also share in the risks, because there is a big issue with local currency risks as against the forex risks, right? And how to take up that currency risk and not pass it on to the farmer, thereby further worsening their ability to also feed into this payment or payback of the funding. Yes, so those are my questions or concerns.
Thank you so much. So what I heard there really is three things: ticket sizes, pricing, and risk. Yeah. Peter Nell, I think it may be you, and it may be you, Barry.
Yeah, thank you for those questions, and nice to see you here, of course. And size, indeed. What we see often that there are models that are globally, centrally determined and established, but don't fit the Ghana circumstances. So that should be adjusted. I fully agree. I cannot say otherwise. On the price, that's always an issue, of course, because on the one hand, you want to make it affordable, but at the same time, there are great risks attached to certain investments. So how to balance that, that's one thing. One thing to do there, and that is why we always say aggregate. The more small farmers you have, the lower the risk, and therefore the lower the interest price should be, or at least somebody should negotiate this on behalf of a big group of smaller farmers. That is the beauty of aggregation, and also establishing track records, because the more data you have on the farmers, however small, and that is certainly happening today, that there's a lot more data collected by SNV, but also organizations like Solidaridad, who collect a lot of data on the performance of farmers. So so if you have that, it also reduces the risk. So that is one. That's what we always recommend. As a development institution, we cannot offer subsidized pricing. Unfortunately, maybe that is something we can discuss with the government, but at the moment this is not the case, it's not allowed. So we have to provide market rates. So the main advice I can give you is make sure you aggregate and reduce the risk and can show a track record. Then, of course, the local currency, foreign currency, Barry already mentioned that. That's a challenge, but I guess in Ghana, maybe it's slightly different because you have a big cocoa export value chain that generates dollars. So maybe for those it may be less of an issue, but local currency is, of course, that's an issue that is not easily resolved. But one way to do it is indeed not to only let it sit with the farmer, but to share it along the chain. And we are always pushing the companies that buy the cocoa or the coffee or the grains, especially the large ones, to make sure that this is not happening. It's not a solution, but I hope at least it gives you some answers to your question.
Thank you, Peter. Now, just before you come in, Barry, touch that. Well understood on the need for the market rates, and there are, blended financing instruments with your other ODA monies that come in to complement some of those market rate mechanisms. And if we can figure out the right forms of blending, perhaps that addresses some of the challenges that you raised. But Barry.
Well, I think here we started out. What is a definition? Is somebody in Holland made a definition what they think it's small. So I fully agree. That was my point in the beginning. We made it extremely complicated the way that we are giving loans out. So just as a point, and that's my point, we should make it simple. I do think that well, I like the discussion about adaptation finance, because I do think that adaptation finance also means ecological services of the smallholder farmer. And I think that we need to completely look at that differently. Also, the cash flows that are coming there. We are experimenting as Rabobank now with agroforestry, where we are paying actually the farmer to grow the trees that he needs to do the adaptation and mitigation, so that we actually pay for the carbon sequestrated in that trees directly to the farmer, and we sold those carbon units into the international market. So I do think also that as a community we need to find more smart ways of paying for these ecological services, and not through loans, but really through the carbon, because a carbon that the farmer in Ghana, Brazil, or the Netherlands, wherever the world takes out of the air, is actually the same carbon anywhere. It doesn't matter. So I think that we really need to change the way we look at it. And the value of a carbon in Africa should actually be exactly the same value of a carbon in Europe. And that's what we are really trying to get, get our heads around as Rabobank, to see how we can get there. We have been working on it, but I recommend we talk later about the Acorn project. And at the end of this local currency, that's all the goal of developing strong local banks, and is all about developing a local saving system that allows you to finance in local currency. What we should start doing is de-risking that portfolio in local currency. That's what we should be looking at, more than trying to fund the portfolio out of with hard currency. Because at the end, with the cocoa, but the cocoa is one of the few exceptions. 90 to 95% of all food produced in Africa is actually sold in the domestic market to the domestic local. So maybe we have to sit together and sit with the government of the Netherlands. How could we actually not think about giving the loan, but de-risk the local currency transaction?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you. So with that, I'm delighted to welcome Ralph van der Beek, Director, International Agribusiness and Food Security from the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality, to give some concluding remarks. Welcome, Ralph.
Thank you. Thank you all. The last speaker, so you're all waiting to go away, but I'll be brief. I won't try to summarize everything that's been said in this very interesting panel, but I just wanted to give you a couple of takeaways that I will be making. While I'm very new in this position, I just started 6 weeks ago, this topic is close to my heart and experience, because up until a month ago I was the chair of the OECD Policy Network on FDI qualities and its impact on the SDGs. And from the discussion here and from the last 4 years that we've been working on getting a set of indicators and a toolbox to maximize the impact of FDI on SDG goals, I see a lot of similarities, and the big issue always is bankable projects. I think Laureen said it best. Issues and projects are looking for money, but money is also looking for projects. And that is a real challenge. And I think we've heard a couple of great examples of how do you get these bankable projects, which is involve everyone. It's about what we proudly call the Dutch Diamond, bringing together government, academia, business, civil society, and all the knowledge together. And you said it, each doing their best and not duplicating, but coming together. So I think that's a very important one. Local context, essential. A one-size-fits-all doesn't exist. And you really need to bring in the local context. Aggregation, obviously been mentioned a number of times, important for lots of reasons, not least for de-risking. So that is really also essential. And then a point mentioned, which I very much take to heart, decomplicated. Absolutely true. I wholeheartedly agree. At the same time, it is one of those multifaceted monsters that government is dealing with. I don't know how many times we have set up, decomplicating rules, mechanism, and what we decomplicate on the one end, we almost inevitably complicate on the other end. So that is truly a challenge, but essential that we tackle it. And tackle, that also helps tackle the issues and also gives broader possibility to incorporate local context, because you're right, we look at this from The Hague and spread this to the world, but that is not necessarily, not necessarily, that is not the best solution. So thank you very much. This has been very useful for me, and I hope you've also enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph, for those excellent concluding remarks. So with that, it just falls to me to say a great thanks to our distinguished panelists, and also to echo that plea for simplification, to highlight that in fact we, us, the actors in this room, do indeed have the power to simplify things, and indeed we also have the power, and we've heard it clearly now because we've heard a number of great successes, we have the power to take them to 10x or 100x. So thank you so much for such a wonderful discussion. Thank you.